Quick history lesson. In the early 1930s, America tried to ban people from buying alcohol to try and lower crime rates, among many other things. As you can probably imagine, that wasn't a very popular move, and things became worse than before alcohol was banned. People called this the Noble Experiment because it was an idea that had good intentions and was definitely worth trying, but it just didn't quite work. That's kind of what Tenet feels like to me. Christopher Nolan was trying to see if he could make a movie that did everything right, but took characters out of the equation and have it still be good. It's an idea that was worth trying out, and it did mostly work, but I don't think it fully stuck the landing. I'm going to discuss why that is, along with my general thoughts on the movie, right now. Starting off with the bad, this movie can be really confusing at times. A big thing in Tenet is a concept called inversion, where something or someone can move backwards in time. People moving in opposite directions through time look like they're moving in reverse to each other. If I were inverted and you weren't, for example, I'd be moving in reverse to you, but you'd be moving in reverse from my perspective. There are loads of moments where people are going into the past and everything looks like it's moving in reverse, and it can be quite difficult to wrap your head around. I also did notice a few moments where the movie didn't seem to follow the rules it set out. You definitely need to watch this movie a few times if you want to understand it well. I also don't like this movie's take on time travel. If you've seen, or read, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, then you know how Tenet's time travel works. You can't change the present, and everything plays out the way it's meant to. I'm not really a fan of this approach because it means anything the characters do doesn't affect anything, because that's how it's gonna pan out anyways. I definitely prefer the idea that time travel is really dangerous, and that changing the past can change the present, because it makes the stakes a lot higher. Like I mentioned in the intro, Tenet doesn't focus on developing its characters at all, even crediting the main character as the protagonist. The problem with this is by the end of the movie, it feels like something's missing, and it also risks the movie becoming boring and making you not care about what's happening. In any story, the character should go on a journey, and by the end of it, you should see that they become better people. Because you've followed the characters through this journey, it's satisfying to see them finish it and ultimately win. Tenet doesn't have that though, so it doesn't feel very satisfying when the protagonist saves the day, even though it should, because it doesn't feel like he's gone through anything meaningful. Finally, I think this movie might be a little too ambitious for its own good. Christopher Nolan is known for having really complicated and complex ideas, but I think he took it a bit too far with Tenet, even if I respect him a lot for this movie. Experimenting with taking characters out of the equation, on top of the inversion concept, makes this movie really confusing, and I think just one of those ideas would make the movie complex enough. At this point, I think I've given the impression that I don't like this movie, but that couldn't be further from the truth. I can't say it's objectively a great movie, but I do still really like it for loads of reasons. First of all, the action is really good. Like the last movie I reviewed, it's quite varied, so it manages to stay tense and exciting throughout, which is obviously really important. All the action scenes are shot pretty well, and the choreography is really good too. The inversion element makes it really fun to watch too, because you see some things happening in reverse and other things happening normally, which is really cool to see. The one action scene I don't like is the final battle, which is a full-on war, and it's kind of unclear why a war was even needed, but even that was still pretty entertaining to watch. So overall, I really like the action in this movie. Also, the music is pretty great as well. There are loads of scenes where it seems like the music is being played in reverse, and there are other scenes where the music is the same when played backwards or forwards, which is really cool. A lot of the music also builds so much tension, and I don't think the action scenes would have been nearly as good without it. Despite Tenet not fleshing out any of its characters, I think it does do an okay job of turning us against the villain. He doesn't have a really good backstory, but the movie clearly shows us that he needs to be stopped, so we do care about what happens, which is one of the things that this movie was risking. Another thing I'm a big fan of is the plot of this movie. It's basically about a group of secret agents travelling through time to stop World War III, which is a really good concept. Although I think the end result was a bit too confusing, I really like the basic premise of it a lot. I also really like that Tenet does have a pretty big reveal at the end. Throughout the whole movie, you're wondering who Neil, played by Robert Pattinson, is, and where he came from, and when it's revealed at the end, the movie starts to make quite a bit more sense. It also does send a nice message, which is that you can't change what's happened, and you should focus on being the main character in your own story going forward. If you're one of the two people that may have actually made it to this point, then you might be a little confused about what I think of this movie. Simply put, I think this movie is really confusing, and it doesn't quite live up to its ambitions. But it's also really entertaining, and I think anyone can watch this movie and enjoy it thanks to its action, its visual effects, and its really interesting ideas. I also respect Christopher Nolan so much for making this movie, because he always tries to push the boundaries, unlike so many directors who just play it safe. So if you're wondering whether or not you should watch Tenet, I absolutely think you should, because even if you don't completely understand it, it's still really entertaining, which is the most important thing a film has to get right at the end of the day.